I'd just like to thank Sophie and Andrew for publishing Dimmer and Pisswell. And thank you all for coming on. It was a very cold night. So Dimmer is one of a series of, or sequence of short stories I've been writing about a couple of paranormal investigators called Henry and Rowena, and also characters who kind of cluster around a subreddit called Erie England. The main dynamic between the two characters is that Henry is so profoundly sceptical of anything paranormal that he doesn't believe that Rowena is psychic when she is profoundly psychic. And they also kind of talk to each other in their stories, trying to explain to them what's happened. So this story is written by Rowena. So this is Dimmer. After we'd hiked across the moor and found the lake low down in the flatlands, rather than help me scope out and catalogue the site, you became overly involved with your reflection in the black water. I must have been standing a little further back than you. Some trick of the light made my likeness a zigzagged blur on the surface tension of the lake. In contrast, your eyes and mouth and foxish cheekbones stayed shiningly distinct. I did like the way we looked, mysterious and serious, hazy and rock hard. Me, the psychic detective girl, and you, the cultural geography maestro, out to investigate the striking but contentious photograph of the so-called Black Lamia of Lake Mott, a cool celeb in certain quarters you were already sure was another fake. Although I doubted it, you being you, I wondered if the stories attached to Lake Mott had unsettled you. The lake is bottomless, according to legend, and the haunt of a long-armed, snaggle-toothed water demon with an insatiable appetite for human life. On certain forgotten feast days, this black lamia will float on the surface of Lake Mott, the face of one who will drown someday at noon, and use the wind to call his name. The wind was harsh, persistent that day, if you remember. I elbowed you. Don't stare too hard, I said. When water isn't water, it can stare back. After we'd left the car at Tongue's End Reservoir and found the stony path to the Humpback Bridge that set us on our way to Lake Mott, during the hike you had laughed and made woo noises when I reminded you that just because the photo was a fake, the lamia should not be casually and scornfully dismissed before a proper divining of the lake and its environs. Now you were standing where the photo had no doubt been taken. You were withdrawn and preoccupied, not yourself. By this point in our relationship, I understood that you think very different to me when I see very differently to you. This is something your cold maths brain knew about me, but as you did not feel it in your blood, you did not allow for it. You could have told me if you saw or heard anything odd as you stared at yourself, staring back at yourself. Something in the water, maybe, something in the wind. I would not have judged. I would have tried to engage it. I know you were scared. Your aura, usually bright, precious metallic, was black-brown, like the smoke from a guttering candle. I knew something struck you as wrong on the shore of Lake Mott. I elbowed you again, and you snapped out of your Narcissus impression, and remarked that the lake was smaller than you'd assumed. It had looked like a sizable tarn on the internet, but in reality it was only about the size of an Olympic swimming pool. The water was so black that even inches from the shore I couldn't see the sand or gravel of the lake bed. It was not surprising locals of yore thought the lake bottomless. You pointed at the ridge up at the top of the steep bank on the other side of the lake. Whoever took the photo was standing there, you said, and whoever they saw, I said, was up there looking down. The only other patch of accessible shore was way off on the eastern tip of the lake. The high ridge ahead of us sloped down to the east, when whatever had appeared in that photo had manifested at the crest of the ridge as high point opposite where we stood. Of course, we had no idea when the photo had been taken. It could be years old. All we could be reasonably confident of now we were here, doing optical research, fieldwork, picking up signals and vibes, was it had been taken at Lake Mott. The geographies aligned, the visuals corresponded. What had been taken, though, was still an open question. for me at least. When we first got wind of a strange sighting at Lake Mott, when 3 weeks earlier an unattributed photograph had appeared on the subreddit r Erie England and posted by a user crested Black19, who it would seem had found it elsewhere on the web, the image having cropped up already on various Substacks, top 5 ghost caught on camera channels and paranormal threads. Whoever had taken the photo was standing lower down than the subject, at a distance of about 25 metres, a body of water between them. 25 metres is, as we soon realised, about the width of Lake Mott from the western beach where we'd entered and the opposing side. The subject stands on the Black Ridge, the water at the forefront gunmetal grey, the sky behind it tinged a similar pewter colour. When the image is zoomed in to the point of pixelation, the figure appears thin and wrapped in a tattered robe or shroud. Right shoulder turned outwards, its arm reached well below its knee, the hand talonish, and the face a kind of black oval smudge with white pinprick eyes and some hint of a hanging maw. By the time the image reached Erie England, or the chorus hysterical as you call the subreddit, it had already been hastily and assertively confirmed as a sighting of the legendary Black Lamia of Lake Mott. Set aside were all reservations that it could be an art school end-of-year project intended to spoof and interrogate the paranormal internet and its visual grammar, tropes and cliches, or another grainy shot of the alarming Hardmore Gimp taken on a cell phone camera by a couple of star-crossed lovers for some bizarre reason, ending a date parked up and semi-undressed at Lake Mott. As you had a pre-existing interest in Lake Mott, not in the lake and its mythology, but the ruined lodge in the nearby woods. The lodge had been previously owned by the debauched and deviant Eden family, and later used by some of your favourite dead horror writers as a retreat until it burned down in 1980. I suspected it was the opportunity to check out the Lake Mott retreat, or dimmer house, that made you insist we investigate the Lamia, especially as your first reaction to the photo was it was a hilarious fake, no more scary than a Halloween costume Edward Scissorhands or Robert Smith from The Cure. My first reaction was that the photo traps some dark thing that may or may not answer to the name of Black Lamia, and of which we ought to be wary if not downright afraid. As several posters in Erie England reminded us, it has many names in England: Jenny Greenteeth, Grendel, the Grindylow, Peg Powler, the Nix, the Knucker. It longs to draw us under the water, to have and to hold in the bottomless depths. It whispers names. It makes faces out of swells and eddies. Like all waters, it flows, it drags and sucks. It is lonely, it craves. I knew you'd heard of this creature too, as the night before, in the saloon bar of the pub we stayed in overnight, the Curate's Egg in Hardmore, by the fire with our glasses of wine, you told me you had first come across the Black Lamia, not in some wild corner of the paranormal internet, nor in any of the scattered articles and chapters about the weird history of the Eden family, but in a short story in a book you found abandoned in a train station waiting room, a collection called The Underkin and Other Stories by Estrella Themis. It featured a fable about a Victorian land surveyor who dies by drowning, his drowning foretold by the Black Lamia of Lake Mott. This story had discomforted you more than any other you had ever read. The depiction of fate randomly allotted by the mere act of staring into black waters. Fate as something that cannot be outrun or outsmarted, the manifestation of evil wanting, evil longing. That evil is forever and never satiated. This and other stories in the book made you ditch it yourself before your journey was over. I wondered if you were experiencing some reverberation of this reading now we have reached Lake Mott. It should be no surprise that a good horror writer might draw from the stories of Lake Mott like a carrion bird strips flesh from the carcass of a dead beast. Maybe the author had visited the area and soaked up its folklore, much like Arthur Conan Doyle drew from the stories of Black Shuck he heard on the Norfolk coast to conjure his hound of the Baskervilles. The question was whether the real Lake Mott could live up to its reputation. I wish you would have told me what was drifting through your mind as you stared into the water. I mean, the previous night I had confessed to you that when I was a child I frequently saw a ghost in our house I came to call the milk curdler. I had never told anyone this before apart from my father, and he died soon after I told him. You raised an eyebrow and asked intrusive questions about my childhood again, rather than ask why I'd named it the milk curdler, and what had happened to it, what it was like, the milk curdler. I changed the subject as we were in earshot of Normskis and Gritwalkers. I sensed some of them already thought I was what they call a witch, but I call alive. All I knew is that on the shore of Lake Mott I felt something twitch, and wished you were able to admit you felt it too. In this, we could have been fully together at last. Thank you very much. You're all very worthy of laudation. Thank you.